Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. We have a problem. India is generating about 12, or rather needs about 12 million new jobs every year. They had about 40,000 new people coming into the workforce. The question is, where are the jobs? Subir Gokarn of the Brookings Institution India and formerly Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank has written an article this morning in the newspaper which asks quite startlingly and says that the majority of India's workforce will actually be obsolete before it even starts working. And that's quite frightening. So I'm joined by both Subir Gokarn as well as the National Skills Development Corporation Managing Director Dilip Chenoy, but to get a sense on A, how bad is the jobs problem in India, what could it do, and finally, what are the solutions, not just specifically and empirically, but also from a policy standpoint. So before I come to Dilip in a moment and take some of the questions that are beginning to come in, Subir, why don't you give us a sense, how bad is the problem of job creation and meeting the needs of this workforce, which is rather labor force, which is burgeoning?
Yeah, so I want to start by providing some perspective, which I hope people read my article in the Business Standard of this morning. But I think it's important to have some perspective on the numbers. And the number that we are very familiar with is 1 million entrants into the workforce every month, 12 million jobs a year needed, or if you want to round it off, 10 million. So that's all very fine. But let's not forget that our record in terms of job creation has been very, very inadequate. More than 50% of our workforce is still primarily dependent on agriculture, even though agriculture has shrunk to less than 15% of our GDP. Of the people who go out of agriculture, close to 60%, and there's some more recent numbers out, so maybe that will change, but close to 60% are in either self-employed positions, which is not, people like you, Govind, but the average person selling stuff off a street cart, cigarettes, pan, fruits, whatever. And another close to 20% are in the informal sector. So this is a huge barrier in terms of people moving out of relatively low productivity jobs into what we might consider desirable jobs, relatively organized, with protections, rights, and so on, and with upward mobility, with the prospect of increasing their income as they go along. This is how countries develop. This is how countries move from people to middle income, and that's a process that are today.
Right. So, Dilip, let me come to you. You're part of an effort that's obviously trying to address the problem of jobs and skills, and thus job creation. How do you see the scale of the problem, and to what extent can the efforts that are being put in on the supply side resolve this in the near future?
Actually, three issues. I could not hear much of what Subir said because our audio was not coming through to me. Three types of issues, I think, two of which Subir has actually referred to very, very clearly. What is the number of jobs that will be generated over the next few years in relation to the number of people entering the workforce? The second is the changing nature of the job roles that are there and the ability for people who are trained in today's skills to be able to meet tomorrow's requirements. I think third, most importantly, I think overlooked is the whole productivity of the workforce. The NSDC efforts are really on three fronts, but in the first one, in creation of jobs, we are not actually in a power or in a possible position to create jobs in the economy, because that is a function of economic policy and other things that are beyond the scope of NSDC. What we are trying to do is to equip people with entrepreneurial skills, with livelihood skills, so that in the rural setting and the semi-urban and even in some cases the urban setting, people can take recourse to entrepreneurship and livelihood measures to be able to earn livelihood and create and add to the job pool. So that's one For example, working with self-help groups who could sell products or make products and sell products,
Right.
or artisans who could be linked to selling organizations, etc. In the case of skilling, what we are trying to do, when we have a target. Last year we were given a target of about 1 million people. This year, I think that the target may more than double to 2.5 or 3 million. We are just awaiting the numbers, but internally we are targeting around 3 million plus people this year. And what we are trying to do, there is a regular need to skill people for jobs in industry, and second, the need to upskill people who are working within industry. For example, in some cases, an old lathe machine is being upgraded to a CNC machine. The old lathe operator has to be trained on a CNC machine, because if he doesn't get skilled on the CNC machine, he will lose his job and will not be fit to work in the company. Or similarly, if you take another sector, if you take even in IT, many of the people who used to work in a particular function in a call center, that function has been replaced by international, an IVR system. The jobs have become redundant. How do you retrain them, reskill them for other positions? This is the second kind of activity that we are doing. The third is in terms of productivity. How do you ensure that people who are getting skilled are being skilled to international standards, to international levels of productivity? We are collaborating with sector skill councils, let's say in Australia, UK, and Germany, to get a sense of their competency standards and their standards to ensure that the training that is done in India meets their standards so that we are globally competitive.
Right. Got that, Dilip. Let me come back to Subir. Subir, so you made a couple of points, right? So one is that you're talking about almost 1 billion people in the workforce by 2030, right? So, and that's a really large number. On the other hand, you're also pointing out that there is the march of technology. By definition, the march of technology leads to more cutback in labor. And of course, there's offshoring. I mean, offshoring could happen within the country, it could happen from country to country, and so on. So all the other forces that could potentially create jobs or help the creation or absorb jobs seem to be against this, sort of mitigating the problem, as it were. So what's the way forward then?
To recognize that these forces are above us. They are shaping the global market. They're shaping the global production environment. They're shaping everything that influences our ability to put more people to work in the kinds of jobs that we would like them to be in. I think the NSDC is a very important part of the solution, and I think that it's a great initiative. I hope they scale up to the levels that they aspire to. But that's only one part of the solution. The main thing is that because of offshoring, and I'll specifically refer to the offshoring thread, that we can only generate jobs onshore if we become the lowest cost production center, which means that we have to be putting everything into play, which ensures that our producers, whoever they are, whether they're domestic or foreign, find India a place to locate because of cost efficiency. And that means having workers that are both relatively low cost, which is something we can certainly do, but also relatively productive, which is, I think, where our challenge is. The training comes in there, but it's a lot of other things also. There's infrastructure relating to transportation and so on. There are tax issues, movement of goods across state borders, a whole bunch of other enabling factors that I think they have to get into place. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that an employment strategy is not just about providing skills and creating jobs. It's also about creating the larger macro and institutional ecosystem, which enables us to become efficient producers. That's how jobs are going to be created. We cannot resist or cannot stop the march of technology. But to the extent that labor still is an attractive option, or labor-intensive activity is still an attractive option, we have to be sure that we are competitively placed to take full advantage of it. The second second point I want to make is that skills become obsolete very quickly now. 3 years, 5 years max, technology has moved on. A person who was trained in one particular technique is obsolete 5 years down the road. So we have to also build in, and I thought I heard Dilip say that the NSC is also looking at mid-career and periodic skill upgradation. I think that's going to be very, very critical if we are going to survive, if we are going to sustain the kind of job growth momentum that we need to. Not just training people out of school and then putting them to the workforce and forgetting about them, but also providing formal training which allows for skill upgradation. That requires financing, that requires a bunch of other institutional changes, which I think we have to start thinking about very seriously now.
Dilip, one of the points that, okay, let me throw a couple of questions that have come in. So first is, can we put the entire blame on the government or the system? Has private sector and industry done its bit? 40,000 jobs a day cannot just be going to the government, asked Shruti. Dilip, did you hear that question?
Questions for me?
Yeah, the question's for you.
Yeah, this is about has private sector
and industry done its bit? Yeah.
Bit for creating jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is a very it's a question which actually has a very long and difficult answer. But if the economy is not growing, right?
Yeah.
And if you take the auto sector, if you're having inflation driving up the cost of petrol, high interest rates, nobody buying new cars because of conditions external to the industry, how can you blame the auto industry for not creating jobs? It's I think the whole and with the bits of pieces that I could hear Subir actually talking, which he said that you need to look at the whole ecosystem. In the given ecosystem, the rate of creation of jobs by the private sector perhaps not bad, right?
Right.
It could be better. Yes, it could be better, but it cannot be done by industry alone in isolation of the economic environment within the country. And if incentive to protect existing jobs and not create new jobs, then it actually throws things further out of gear. And the other aspect is that I think the data relating to job creation needs to be looked at, because if 83% of the jobs in the economy are the informal sector, I think we are missing a lot of the numbers of jobs that are being created. So it's can the private sector do more? Given circumstances, if the economic situation changes, I'm sure the job creation scene will also change.
Right. So the one reason we are having this discussion now, Dilip, and of course this has had, and there are many occasions when this discussion can be had, is that we're obviously looking at a new government coming in, and the urgency for a huge policy kick is perhaps has never been felt so much or to this extent. So what do we need to do to both on the demand side and the supply side in order to now accelerate either the creation or the absorption process when it comes to new jobs?
I think Subir is more qualified to actually address that question. I don't know. I think Subir, would you like to step in and really talk about job creation here?
Subir?
I'm having a little trouble with the audio. You said something about what the
Okay, Subir, I think we're having a slight problem with Subir's line. We'll get him back in a second, Dilip. So let me come back to there's another question here. Is the NSDC equipped to manage skilling and reskilling 40,000 people a day?
If you're talking about the NSDC being equipped to skill 40,000 people a day as of today, the answer is clearly no. But the question is, are we creating an ecosystem to ensure that at least 45,000 people a day would be skilled sometime going forward in the next 2 years? The answer is yes. We must understand that skilling and education is an exponential growth kind of a system. You can't build scale overnight.
Right.
And second is that the traditional way of skilling, where you have square feet and boards and one teacher for 20 students, is kind of getting outdated, because we need to use technology, and we need to use technology to how do we take the best teacher to 1 million students? How do we use simulation in reducing the cost of training? And I think NSDC is actually creating an ecosystem to do that. Just to give you an example of the type of scale that we are talking about. 2 years ago, we trained 120 or 180,000 people, 180,000 people. Last year, it was 400,000 people. The year after that. Last year, it was 10.9 lakh people. And this year, we're looking at 30 lakh plus people. And
So
the year
1
after
million
that,
to 3 million, yeah.
Yeah, 3 million. So that's the type of exponential growth that you would have going forward. And we are fairly confident that the target of 150 million by 2022 would be achieved. I think Subir's article today talks about 2030, slightly longer time frame. And by that time, we should have a stable ecosystem. The next 4 to 5 years, we should have a stable ecosystem within the NSDC framework to ensure that numbers that we are talking of are actually catered for.
Right. So, what are the, from your experience, Dilip, what are the issues on the demand side? I mean, I think so. You've laid out the path, and as you've done before in the past as well, the path on the supply side, right? How you will capture the workforce in terms of skilling them or reskilling them, pumping them back into the system. But what's it looking on the other side?
From the demand side, from the job side, I think the first issue is that the areas of growth that we are seeing are limited to very, very few sectors. If you look at the STAR scheme that we're running as an indicator of the areas of growth, it is retail, it is banking services, it's fibers, right? And the manufacturing side has not yet taken off. But we can sense the underlying kind of energy being built up there, so that when GDP rebounds, I think there will be a stronger growth for that. The second is that time and again we are finding what the education sector believes is correct is not necessarily the same as that which is being perceived by the employer. I mean, just a few weeks back, I think Subir hosted a presentation by the McKinsey on the employment survey that they had done.
Yeah.
And very interestingly, in that it said that 83% of the education establishments felt that they were doing a good job. Less than 50% of the employers agreed with them. So what we are trying to do here is actually to bridge the world of education, the world of employment, getting employers to actually set standards which the education institutions could then use as a tool for aligning some of their courses, so that when the people come out from the education establishment, they're not only educated, but they're also prepared for the world of work. And the third thing, which is again critical going forward, is kind of have to anticipate technology changes and start training people. Even if a person joins the engineering course right now, after he passes out of 4 years, so someone has to be predictive about what would be something required 4 years hence or 3 years hence. And how do you prepare people to adapt to that, and how do you make them learn? Because what they're teaching the energy sector today may well, the requirements of the energy sector may change tomorrow. That's the three things that we're looking at from the demand side, and we've set up these 29 sector councils which are led by industry and the employers to actually advise us and guide us on how the future would look 2 to 3 years from now, as well as how do we plan for next year.
Right. So Dilip, here's the other question. Now, when you talk about jobs, I mean, you've given the numerical, maybe the verticals. How does it look horizontally and geographically? I mean, where is most of the skilling happening? What is the kind of demographic spread and width, if there were?
We are just in the process of completing a district-wise, state-level skill gap survey across different districts.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if I were to look at the STAR program, what we are finding is a lot of inputs from Bihar, some parts of Uttar Pradesh, where people are very keen to learn skill, and there are some very interesting migratory trends. Gems and jewelry is picking up in parts of Orissa and West Bengal. We find that these people actually go to places like Gujarat, Bombay, and Delhi to work. Hospitality is also there. Of course, the classic place of plumbing is in Orissa. So we are finding 2-3 different types of things in terms of spatial things, that there are some centers which are the employment centers, and there are some centers which are providing for the migratory kind of workforce that goes and works there. And there are very, very specific migration trends from these people. So that's something which we are trying to actually capture there. In the Northeast, we find that there are less jobs and more people. There's kind of a deficit of about 10 to 12 million people for people jobs in the future. So again, in J&K, there is no economic activity, so a lot of the jobs will necessarily be outside the state. The southern states have shortages in some areas of employment. There's a mismatch between high job growth areas. In many states, construction is a high growth area, but the aspiration to work in the construction industry is very low.
Right.
So we find a mismatch in terms of aspiration, and we also find a mismatch in terms of the availability of jobs and the number of people that need to be employed.
Right. So, how is the next year looking, Dilip? If very broadly, if one were to look at the targets, you said 3 million is something that you're closing in on now. Is there sufficient momentum in the skilling side to keep it going? Assuming that, of course, we've all, having seen that economic growth has not been strong enough to absorb all your efforts.
Yeah, so, like I said in the beginning, we are not only focusing, most programs tend to focus on you train a person for a job, you get him employed in the organized sector, and that is known as placement. We're looking at different models. We're also looking at, some of our models are, for example, a caravan or industry are training people in certain crafts, and they're giving design-led inputs for those people to, make those crafts or those products and
right.
Sell them. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship. There's like Mandeshi Foundation and HSBC in Satara are looking at women into making them entrepreneurs and getting them to do jobs. Similarly, we have Mudra Microfinance or Sayog Microfinance. We have different models across the country. Entrepreneurship and self-employment is a key aspect of that. Now, we typically track month by month. It's somewhat like the IPL kind of the worm that you have. We have the worm of last year, how many did in April last year, and how many we expect to do in April this year. And numbers that we are seeing that we have actually done a little more than 3.5 times this April than we did last year. The same trend continues, right? We should be able to actually you know, meet the target that has been set by ourselves currently. And if the economy were to improve in the third or fourth quarter of this year, and if the mood were to lift maybe the next quarter, then perhaps we might see a bigger expansion of these numbers.
Right, Dilip, we've run out of time. We lost Subir somewhere halfway, and we must, of course, continue that conversation, or rather this conversation with him, and touch upon some of the policy challenges in doing all of this. And Subir has argued that the solutions to these 21st century problems cannot be found in 20th century architecture. So we're going to come back on that and continue our conversation on the India Hangout. Thanks, both of you, and thanks for watching.